A 30-year-old salaryman and games enthusiast is suddenly killed in a car accident. He finds himself reborn into a fantasy world but in the form of a sword. He learns that he is an intelligent weapon and that his design looks like a sword found at the end of an RPG. He uses his telekinesis skill to slay goblins and absorb their crystals, gaining new skills and abilities. He encounters an air floater and uses his telekinesis to kill it, absorbing its crystal. He also gains 3 new skills, including float, which allows him to fly 5 times longer and slay a monster centipede. This skill, combined with his telekinesis, gives him 10 evolution points, which he uses to gain improved MP1 and improved Attack 1. The sword locates a cave that acts as a goblin nest. He kills the Goblin King and the rest of the goblins, achieving level 3 sword mastery. Meanwhile, a black cat girl protects another slave from a beating by one of their overseers but is ordered to stand down. She is scolded and not allowed any dinner that night. The following morning, the black cat girl tries to retaliate against her overseer again, only to be ordered down to the ground. Later, she and the other slaves ride a wagon through a forest, where she chants that she will get stronger and evolve. The sword's distance from the location reflects how stronger the monsters he encounters are. The sword challenges the Area 5 boss, a gluttonous slime, and defeats it using his telekinesis catapult and wind shooter skills, which he calls Heavenly Slash. He receives 30 EP and some new skills, including Insta Region 1, which allows him to regenerate himself at the cost of a ton of MP. The sword then tries out the pocket dimension, which instantly stores the gluttonous slime's corpse. Eventually, the sword would face off against the eastern boss, the Doppelsnake, and would gain its doppelganger ability, which unimpressed him. He'd then face off against Area 5's northern boss, a blast turtle. He defeats the blast turtle with an earth wall and Heavenly Slash and gains 2 new abilities. The next day, the sword faces off against the western boss of Area 5, Tyrant Sabertooth. After defeating the monster, the sword evolves again, gaining new stats. Longing to face off against new, stronger monsters, the sword heads into the forest beyond Area 5. When the sword plants himself into the ground, he learns that his MP is being absorbed by it and becomes stuck there. Meanwhile, a twin-headed bear attacked the wagon the black cat girl and the slaves rode on. It sequentially destroys the wagon and kills some of the slaves as well as an overseer. This grants the black cat girl's freedom, and while wielding a stick, she attacks the monster but is blown away by its awesome power. Desiring more power, the sword calls out to the black cat, who finds him and uses him to defeat the twin-headed bear. After the fight, the slave trader tries to get the black cat to relinquish the sword, but sword kills the trader and burns the contract that was connected to the black cat's collar. The black cat then agrees to become the sword's wielder to evolve, as no black cat has ever managed to evolve. The sword agrees to train her and help her achieve her goal. The black cat girl then introduces herself as Fran, and because the sword doesn't have a name, Fran calls him teacher. A merchant wagon surrounded by a large group of goblins, an adventurer named Randall struggles to protect the wagon with the merchant inside it. Thankful for Fran's help, Randall asks if she'd like a ride to Alessa. The teacher considers the offer a way for Fran to help him protect the wagon until they reach their destination. En route to their destination, Randall explains to Fran the rise in monster encounters within the Great Wolf Plain. Fran then asks if Randall knows about a plain sword implanted within the area. However, Randall does not, much to the teacher's dismay. Randall then asks if Fran is a G-ranked adventurer, which perplexes her and the teacher. Hence, Randall explains the monster ranking system to her and those who hunt monsters, the adventurers. Desiring to become an adventurer herself, Randall explains that Fran will have to register at the Adventurers Guild, where she can sell her monster materials. The wagon arrives in Alessa, and as Fran heads to the Adventurers Guild, he is surprised to find that all the weapons used by the adventurers are much stronger than he was. Fran cheers teacher up by praising him, and they continue on to the guild. At the guild, Nell struggles to maintain a facade while dealing with the boorish behavior of the adventurers. Fran approaches Nell and asks to register as an adventurer, but Nell believes Fran is unfit. Fran takes the mock fight exam, where Donadrand introduces himself to Fran. Teacher casts Identify on Donadrand, and Fran defeats him with a Dragon Fang attack. Fran, along with Donadrand, meets with Guildmaster Klimt in his office. Klimt tries to learn from Fran, but she refuses to answer. Teacher casts Identification on Klimt, learning his impressive stats and skills. Nell enters the room and informs him that everything is in order and Fran is issued her guild card. In a room with stone-carved faces, Fran records her mana signature on a crystal and chooses her class as Spellsword. Nell hands Fran her guild card, and she turns in monster materials to earn 195k gold. As Fran tries to leave, a quartet of adventurers try to extort money from her, but Nell intervenes and disparages the group. One of the adventurers disparages Fran as being from the Black Cat tribe, which triggers her to slice off the adventurer's feet. She then takes out the remaining adventurers with oscillation. Fran leaves the guild, but a dwarf uses God's sight on Teacher to deduce that he is an intelligence weapon. Fran and Teacher explore the stalls around Alessa seeking equipment. They are approached by Garrus, who suggests they visit his shop for some. Teacher casts Identify on Garrus to learn his name, stats, and skills and is impressed by them. After being guided by Garrus to his shop, two men chastise Fran and Envy for being allowed to do business with Garrus, but Garrus claims he was impressed with how she handled the men in the guild. Fran tries on the equipment offered by Garrus, and the Teacher is impressed by their stat boosts and skills. Garrus reveals that he knows the Teacher is an intelligent weapon, and he reveals that he has an extra skill called God Eyes that allows him to see past identity protection. Garrus appraises Teacher and notes that his skills are far more impressive than the others he's seen, which causes Teacher to blurt something out telepathically. Garrus picks up on this and assures the Teacher that he merely wishes to have a chat as an intrigued blacksmith. Garrus reveals that Teacher may not know about monoconductivity. He uses a sword with 450 attack power to demonstrate the difference between the two and reveals that Teacher's monoconductivity is A, meaning he has 200% efficiency. The Teacher's attack power would be over 2k if he used 1k mana, and Garrus praises him as one of the most impressive enchanted swords. Garrus questions who originally forged Teacher and details the history of Godsmiths forging divine swords. The only divine sword he's ever seen was called Ignis. After that, they head to a general store owned by Rufus, who uses Identify to learn his strength. They find cooking supplies and an inn to stay at, and Fran makes fried chicken for Fran. Teacher allocates his EP to healing magic before going to bed. Unbeknownst to them, a horde of goblins emerges from a cave. Fran and Teacher find healgrass, a fruit used to cure poison, and stamina mushrooms for cooking. As G-ranked adventurers, tasks like herb collecting and subjugating monsters were common. Fran helps the adventurers, defeating 3 with a fire spell. The Teacher advises Fran to use earth magic instead. Fran and Teacher cast stone arrow and stone bullet against the goblins, taking out a few in the first volley. Fran approaches the adventurers, casts circle healing on them, and agrees to take the hobgoblin materials as a reward. Fran learns about the inadequacy of their strength from Teacher. She decides to become stronger by mastering Teacher better and uses her abilities to defeat goblins until dusk. Fran levels up to 12 after using Teacher to slay goblins until dusk. The next day, Fran visits Garrus's shop, where she learns that she has killed over 100 goblins. The Teacher asks Garrus to fix up Fran's armor and notes that 2 days from then, Fran will take on her first dungeon. Fran locates the goblin hideout dungeon but is forbidden to enter by Teacher, who suggests they collect the goblin crystals from their corpses. They are approached by Krull, Lily, Eustace, and a couple of other adventurers. Fran points out the goblin hideout to the group, and a dwarven adventurer claims it didn't exist a month ago and believes it to be a recently formed dungeon. Krull suggests Fran return to Alessa and inform the guild master about the dungeon while his group watches over it. Fran agrees to do so. Donadron demands to know how many goblins she slew, but Fran's answer is too vague. With Teacher's help, she answers she slew about 130 goblins, 20 of which were high tier. Donadron believes that such a number would mean that it's a goblin stampede. Klimt opines the situation's circumstances and is disconcerted that it's now considered a dungeon rather than a hideout. In light of this news, Klimt promotes Fran to F rank. Garrus repairs Fran's armor with the help of 4 mana crystals, explaining the properties of mana crystals and the skill he used as an arcane blacksmith. The cost of the repair is 10k gold, but since the crystals lose their effectiveness over time, the subsequent repair would cost 30k gold. Back at the inn, Teacher checks Fran's stats and learns she earned herself the new title Goblin Killer. Fran insists they take a bath together, and they enjoy a meal with Nell, who reveals her disapproval of the Knights Brigade's refusal to assist in the goblin hunt. Nell also mentions that the Knights Lieutenant, a nobleman named Alsand, hates adventurers and turned down the request for assistance for the upcoming goblin quest. Fran learns about the God of Chaos and the God of War, who fell from grace due to becoming addicted to power. The former god tried to subjugate the other gods but was defeated, with parts that weren't sealed transformed into monsters like goblins or orcs. Teacher finds the information insightful, but Fran's head can't handle it. The following day, Fran and Teacher visit Garrus' shop, where he gives them the custom scabbard they requested. They join up with the adventurers tasked with the goblin dungeon subjugation, led by Donadron, who reviews the objective tasks of the mission. Amid this, a swarm of goblins exit out of the dungeon. Fran rescues an adventurer at the mercy of a hobgoblin and uses air leap to gain an aerial advantage before heading inside the cave. The dungeon master gloats about the ambush he orchestrated, and a shadowy figure floats beside him. Fran rushes into a dungeon with Donadron and other adventurers, slaying goblins that block their way. Teacher advises Fran to be cautious and use the feather of return if the fight becomes too dangerous. Fran collects crystals from select goblins and their corpses, while the rest are left for the adventurers to handle. They find an opening with a pathway leading to the second floor, where they encounter swarms of army beetles, some of which have new skills for them to gain. After 30 minutes of slaying the monsters, little progress is made in their endeavor. Teacher casts Tri-Explosion, eliminating the army beetle and leaving the leader vulnerable. After gaining the summon minion skill and raising her wing magic level to 7, Fran finds another door with a potent magical aura. Teacher casts a spell to temporarily raise her stats and regenerates Fran in case of wounds. He promises Fran that when they complete the quest, he will prepare his favorite meal, curry, which makes Fran ecstatic. In Alessa, Nell visits Klimt to inquire about Donadrand and Fran's dungeon subjugation quest. Klimt assures Nell that strong monsters shouldn't inhabit the newly formed dungeon. Donadrand's group cannot pass through the second floor's first door within the dungeon. Over to Fran's side, Teacher casts Identify on the creature and learns it's a greater demon with powerful skills, including Skill Taker. The true Dungeon Master, a rare type of goblin, orders the demon to deal with Fran and chastises her for killing his goblin minions. Endowing himself with 500 MP, Teacher and Fran face off against the greater demon, who wields his own sword. The greater demon held a great advantage over Fran, who managed to slice off Fran's hands. Panic-stricken, Teacher casts Firewall to protect Fran from further damage and reattaches Fran's hands with greater heal. Despite Teacher's advice to use the Feather of Return when a chance arises, Fran is determined to win. Acknowledging that Fran's swordsmanship and agility were superior to his, the greater demon uses his Skill Taker ability to steal them from Fran. Supposedly stealing Fran's skills, the greater demon attacks Fran, only to have the left side of his mouth sliced open by her. Teacher realizes that the greater demon was unaware that he shared his skills with Fran. The dungeon master summons a horde of goblins, but they're instantly destroyed by the demon's black bomb spell. Warning the dungeon master not to interfere again, or his limbs will be torn off, the greater demon then casts Darkness Thunderbolt against Fran. Within the upper parts of the dungeon, Donadrand's group tries to break down the door leading to the deeper level, where Fran was. Dodging the demon's darkness spears, Teacher agrees to give Fran all the power she'll need as she deftly dodges the demon's darkness blaster attacks. Assessing the situation, Teacher speculates on a possible weakness as Fran now dodges black bombs, followed by another darkness blaster and darkness thunderbolt. During these attacks, Teacher notices that the demon purposely avoids the dungeon master. So to test the theory, Teacher has Fran cast a fire arrow at the dungeon master, causing the demon to block the attack with his body. It's then recalled what Donadrand once said about what happens to a dungeon once its master is killed. Hence, Fran and Teacher duo cast multiple fire spells against the demon, who negates the spells with a barrier. Then, Teacher tells Fran to cast a wind spell to fling him toward the dungeon master. Fran does so and creates a decoy with some fire spells. However, the demon was privy to their plans and attacked Teacher with a darkness blaster, but this act was a decoy as Teacher redirected himself toward the demon to stab him in his crystal. Teacher defeats the demon, only to end up in a broken state, leaving Fran devastated. At that moment, Teacher starts to regenerate thanks to the demon's crystal and his MP regen skill. The dungeon master tries to use its remaining MP to summon another powerful demon, but Fran stops him before he does. Afterward, while the dungeon subjugation party returns to Alessa, Teacher informs Fran that she's leveled up to 25 and has both new skills and impressive stats to boot. Teacher was also impressed by his own new stats and skills. Teacher asked Fran what skills they'll invest in, which is decided to be sword mastery and arts. Once the points are allocated to max out both of the skills, Fran learns blade arts, mastery, and elemental. The remaining points they use on skill taker and max it out. That night, Fran returns to the Adventurers Guild, where Klimt greets and congratulates her for her recent accomplishments within the dungeon. On the other hand, Klimt asks Fran what happened to the demon's crystal, and Fran answers that it broke when she slew it. Although hesitant, Klimt believes Fran, noting there was no disturbance from the fairies. Then a homely man in armor barges into the room and claims that Fran was lying. He confronts Fran, who introduces himself as August Alsand, lieutenant of the Alessa Knights Brigade. August boasts about his ability to detect lies and is accused of exploiting it to satisfy his corrupt whims. Despite August's plea to handle Fran for lying, Klimt rejects it, noting Fran's accomplishment by slaying a greater demon and refusing to take the monster's crystals and materials. Fran tries to mediate the situation by offering her goblin materials, which are swiped away by August. Motivated by rage, Fran suggests stabbing August but is stopped by Teacher, who suggests giving a test run of their newly acquired skill taker to August. They steal August's essence of falsehood and noble etiquette. now unable to detect lies and act appropriately. As August leaves the office, Klimt apologizes and explains his distasteful backstory. Fran is promoted to D rank and receives her new rank and rewards from Nell. She is congratulated by the dwarf adventurer 11th and other adventurers for their help in the dungeon subjugation quest. After a week, Fran takes on various guild quests until her armor is completed by Garrus. One late afternoon, Fran learns from the Alessa gatekeeper about Viscount Alsand, or the ignoble knight August, who was looking for Fran. The gatekeeper warns Fran to keep an eye out for any trouble she may encounter involving him. As they walk through town streets, Teacher notifies Fran that they are being tailed, leading them to an inconspicuous area where one of the people reveals themselves to be August, whom Fran doesn't recognize or remember. Upset by this, August calls out his hired assassin Jurin, a blue cat, the weaker subversion of Fran's black cat heritage. Jurin, hired by August, disturbs Fran and forces her to draw Teacher from his sheath. Fran explains the horrific backstory of the Blue Cat clan against her Black Cat clan and orders August to deal with Fran. Jurin tries to attack Fran, but Teacher alerts her to defend herself. Jurin recounts a time when he tortured a Black Cat mother and daughter, and Fran becomes dispirited. Teacher reminds Fran about her ultimate goal to evolve and compares Jurin to the greater demon they had faced. Overcoming her fear, Fran slices off Jurin's sword hand, limbs, and head. A water spirit sent by Klimt summons Fran back to his office, where he reveals that August's father, Count Almaz, had put out a warrant for his arrest regarding a family scandal. Fran asks if she will be paid for her work, and Klimt confirms it. Fran encounters a busty elf named Amanda, who hugs her and demands she address her as Mommy. Amanda tells Fran that she has heard stories surrounding Fran from the guild lobby. Fran is stalked by Amanda, who owns and runs an orphanage for children who have lost their parents. Klimt offers Fran a choice of 2 crystals in exchange for accepting a quest involving a dungeon called the Spider's Nest. Fran manages to squeeze 5 out of Klimt, much to his chagrin. Fran learns that the quest was imposed on her due to the rumors surrounding their relationship and because she had to complete a quest of her rank. If Fran completes the quest, she will gain access to the dungeon in Almut. Amanda breaks down the door to Klimt's office and agrees to accompany Fran on the quest. They discuss the spider's nest and the crystals given to them by Klimt, which Teacher absorbs quickly, causing his abilities to evolve and earning him 45 EP. When Fran arrives at the designated location for her quest, she's embraced by Amanda. Then, the lead adventurer Cruz of Azure Guardians introduces himself and his teammates. Cruz then asks that the other teams introduce themselves, and Crad of the Dragon's Roar goes first and gives Fran a disapproving look. Fran, the Eyes of the Forest party leader, goes next, then Amanda, and finally Fran. Upon hearing Fran's name, Crad becomes contentious toward Fran, claiming she manipulated the guildmaster to promote her quickly. He then recites the nasty rumor surrounding the guildmaster and calls Amanda an old lady, prompting her to accost Crad and force him to apologize. Freed from Amanda's grasp, Crad still refuses to believe Fran didn't manipulate the guildmaster to achieve her ranking, but Fran still denies it. Cruz's explanation of the quest continues with Amanda's role in it, a summary of the quest details, and the Spider's Nest dungeon where it takes place. They then press forward, and Teacher mentions a tip from Garrus about how dungeon cores spawn crystals and monsters, which help guilds financially function. A camp is set up that night, and Fran is assigned to be first on watch duty. As she does, Crad provokes her into dueling him by disparaging Teacher. Hence, Teacher suggests that Fran erect a wind and earth barrier to keep watch for monsters. Fran then casts Wind and Earth Zone, which astonishes Fran. The two then duel, but Fran easily defeats Crad, which intrigues Amanda, who asks her to a friendly duel. Fran accepts on the condition that Amanda stops following her if she wins, and Amanda decides that if she wins, Fran will start calling her Mommy. Determined not to lose, Fran informs the worried Teacher that she accepted the challenge to figure out how long she'd last against a Ranka adventurer. The duel starts, and Fran gives all she's got, but that is not even enough to touch Amanda. Then Amanda gets serious as she imbues her whip with magic. Despite being injured and all, she refuses to give up and continues fighting, eventually using some trick to blast Amanda with her fire magic. Too bad that did not even scathe her, thanks to her protection blessing from the spirits. Fran loses in the duel, but not without putting up a worthy challenge for Amanda, who allows Fran to not address her as Mommy. The following day, Fran formally apologizes to Cruz for using her fire magic so close to the nearby woods during her battle against Amanda. Cruz downplays it and reveals that he, along with Crad's party, challenged Amanda as well, but confesses they didn't last as long against her. Eventually, the group reaches the Spider's Nest, and Cruz uses his guild card, granting passage into it. Walking into the dungeon, Teacher warns Fran to be on guard when she's there. inside the spider nest, alongside the other adventurers. Cruz explains the layout of BF1 and groups the party into places. Amanda tells Fran about the history of the spider nest and how it motivated her to open the orphanage. Their chat is cut short as the trapped spiders encircle them, but they are quickly taken care of by the group as Fran watches with Amanda. As they make their way to BF2, they encounter hornet monsters, and Fran asks Amanda what the difference is between arts, skills, and magic. Amanda explains that in art, more insects attack the rest of the party and uses Crad's attack as an example. On the third floor of BF3, Cruz warns the party that this floor is more trap-oriented, and Crad's party accidentally activates some traps on themselves while the other adventurers activate more traps. Amanda starts to explain skills to Fran. During Amanda's explanation, Ezel uses his trap sense to help him disarm the traps on their path ahead. Fran is interested in this skill, and teacher agrees that having this skill is very resourceful. Continuing on, Amanda explains skills and goes into detail about the types of skills known as unique and bonus skills. Amanda then moves on to magic and explains the 4 main elements that make up magic. She goes into detail about how you can learn each element through intense training related to each element. Fran and Crad lead an assault on the monsters while the rest of the group backs them up. Finally, Amanda tells Fran about compound magic. This magic is made up of wood, ice, life, thunder, sand, and metal. The thunder was the part that caught Fran's attention the most. They made their way to the entrance of BF4, where a swarm of trapped spiders blocked their way. Cruz suggests that the group take a break from BF4, and they all relax in a large room filled with fallen debris and pillars. Fran shows her gratitude by giving Amanda a bowl full of teacher's curry. After eating the curry, Amanda talks about 2 more elements, light and shadow. Then she talks about the skills and abilities associated with said magic. Crad then confesses that their journey so far in the dungeon has been relatively straightforward, but Cruz warns them of the more powerful monsters and traps that lie ahead. Fran then convinces teacher to learn lightning magic and has him use his wind magic skills to get storm and thunder magic. The journey through BF5 is treacherous, and their objective is to reach the core of the dungeon, collect the crystals, and return to BF5. On BF6, they are ambushed by a new variation of trap spiders, and Genel is afflicted with deadly poison. Thus, Fran uses the healing spell, Antidote, on him. Fran's identification reveals the spider's names as Trickster Spider, and Cruz orders everyone to retreat to BF5. With the help of Fran and Amanda, they get back to BF5, but on the way, they are caught in a teleporter and force an equip trap, and in this instance, it teleports them, Victor and Baltz, to another section of the dungeon, without teacher. Upon waking, Fran finds herself in a room with Baltz and Victor and notices a large spider, which is called a Trickster Spider. Returning to teacher, none of his abilities can locate Fran, and he is panicked. Fran, Baltz, and Victor were all trapped in a room with a Trickster Spider. The remaining group discusses finding Fran's group and dealing with the Trickster Spider. Ultimately, Cruz teams up with Crad's group, Rig teams up with Fran's, and Amanda will proceed on her own with teacher. At a safe distance, Amanda uses the wind magic of the noise collector to try and echolocate Fran's location. To her disappointment, Amanda could not find Fran, and she continues onward as teacher worries for Fran's well-being. While Amanda uses the noise collector again, teacher uses split thinking to figure out a skill he could use to help find Fran's location. Teacher decides to use his summon minion skill and, following the system announcer's advice, summons an onyx wolf that immediately attacks him. Alerted by the mysteriously summoned onyx wolf's presence, only for teacher to telepathically communicate with her to stop. He then explains that he's a friend of Fran and that the wolf was there to locate her. Despite being confused by the situation, Amanda agrees to stand down as teacher learns the wolf was under the influence of mana frenzy. Said ailment was caused by teacher using excessive mana to summon the wolf, causing it to experience severe pain and recognize its summoner as a threat. Amanda then proposes that teacher name the wolf as a possible way to tame it. Teacher names the wolf Jet, which not only tames it, but also evolves it into a shadow wolf. With Jet now obedient to his commands, teacher has Jet get a whiff of Fran's scent so he can locate her. Once Jet picks up Fran's scent, he takes teacher to her location as Amanda follows in pursuit. Fran, on the other hand, along with Victor and Baltz, were at the Trickster Spider's mercy and would be overwhelmed by some baby trick spiders. However, recalling teacher's reassurance, Fran gets the courage to fight back by rescuing her 2 fellow captives from the baby spiders and using her hands and legs to kill them. Switching over to teacher's side, his group draws closer to Fran's location until they reach a dead end that Jet suspected Fran was in the vicinity of. Amanda casts Tornado Lance, which destroys the dead-end wall, revealing a hidden pathway littered with spider webs and spiders. Teacher volunteers to go into the newly revealed passageway first. Meanwhile, Fran continues her skirmish against the Tricker Spider. Their fight is interrupted by teacher, who casts eternal fire on himself and catapults himself through the trickster spider, thereby reuniting himself with Fran. Because the trickster spider had run away, Teacher casts greater heal and antidote on Fran. Teacher and Fran have a bonding moment with each other, which is interrupted by Amanda. After Jet is formally introduced to Fran, Amanda personally asks Teacher why he's a talking sword, and with his permission, Fran discloses Teacher's secret to her. After the big revelation, Teacher and Fran healed Victor and Baltz, who were both on the verge of death. Thankfully, the two had no recollection of Teacher's secret. Eventually, Fran's group was ambushed by a white owl, as the trick spider was shown to be still alive and fully recovered from the injuries it sustained from Teacher. Fran, Teacher, Amanda, Jet, Baltz, and Victor face a white owl monster as trick spiders ambush Cruz's side. Fran and Amanda rescue the remaining adventurers trapped by the spider's webs using fire and wind spells. The white owl monster is Rig's familiar Talua, who heals everyone with its magic. Fran used Flare Burst to destroy the trickster spider's shield web and ride on Jet with Teacher enchanted with fire magic to slay it. However, the spider entraps Fran in a sphere of trick spiders. Fran and Teacher duo cast Stun Bolt, allowing them to sequentially break free of their entrapment and stun the trickster spider. The trickster spider's retaliation causes Fran to become overwhelmed, triggering Amanda, who defeats it and destroys its crystal. Doing this upsets Fran, who had wanted to finish off the trickster spider herself, which makes Amanda disheartened by her actions. Fran and Amanda find a new passageway and collect the dungeon core and crystals. Fran asks Amanda if she has ever encountered anyone in the Black Cat tribe who has evolved, but she does recall a couple of black cats who wanted to evolve. Klimt praises Fran for her recent accomplishments in the dungeon excavation and allows her to explore the Ulmut mine. Fran chooses Battle Mage as one of the available new classes. Fran visits Garrus' workshop to pick up the Black Cat armor she commissioned, which was given a divine blessing by the beast gods. Teacher has a snit with Garrus about her abdomen area being exposed, but Garrus explains that it is protected thanks to divine protection granted by the gods. Garrus plans to go towards Ulmut through the mountains instead of sea. The following day, Fran is seen off by her friends in Alessa and rides off on Jet. Thank you for watching till the end, and please don't forget to subscribe.